Hey, it's Friday, and I'm happy to have you here. I was really excited to see about 60 of you last night at our hangout. We had a great time. I was there for about 3 hours. We had a great discussion, lots of laughs, very passionate voices, as always. If you are a paid subscriber and you want to watch the hangout or listen to it, you can go to the link that gets sent to you with today's show. Joining me today, Allison Jaslow, Iraq War veteran and the former Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. She also has run political campaigns and was former Chief of Staff to a Congresswoman, and just a real smart political person, a real smart human being, and an inspiring leader. We had a great conversation yesterday, and I think you're going to love it if you're listening to it for the first time today. It begins at about 24 minutes into today's show. If you want to jump ahead, but I've got your headlines and a great clip show for you here on a Friday. So I'm going to get to it right now. Can't do any of it without your support. Thank you to all new subscribers. Thank you to subscribers who've been with me for a long time who decided to upgrade your pledge or your subscription. A few of you did that this week, and I am real happy to have you here. Thank you to my friend Matt, Kim, Jeremy. Hello to Sharon and Michael J. Hello to Glenn and Ann. Very happy to have all of you. If I didn't mention your name, I just am not going back far enough, but very, very excited to have new subscribers and regular old subscribers upgrading your subscription. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now to today's headlines. A crazy story coming out from the Department of Justice and FBI about a gambling scheme that implicates several NBA figures as well as the Italian organized crime families in New York. It's really wild. A lot of people last night at the hangout thought it was targeting famous and successful, wealthy black folks on purpose, but the basketball world yesterday rocked by a pair of indictments that accused 3 current and former NBA players and coaches have participated in illegal gambling schemes to defraud victims out of millions of dollars. Apparently, the charges are as a result of years of investigation by the FBI, so it's not like the Trump administration FBI just started this investigation, I guess, is the only thing I would observe. And I'm not going to say much more about it than that, just to open the headlines here. Big news out of Virginia. Democrats in the state legislature there announced that they would begin to redraw the state's congressional maps, which could give the Democratic Party 2 or 3 more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Effort makes Virginia the second blue state after California, where Democrats are challenging our aspiring dictator to have Republican-led states draw new districts. And that is big news from yesterday. Another real piece of big news is that our sweet potato Hitler has called off the deployment of federal immigration agents to San Francisco just as they were beginning to gather at a Coast Guard base in the Bay Area. He said that he shelved the move for now at the request of friends who live in the region and who vouch for the work of the city's Democratic mayor, Daniel Lurie. So Don Corleone has made yet another deal with his rich friends, it looks like. See, I'm picking some of the other names. Last night I was scolded for calling him Mad King too much because it sounded like I was still calling him a king. And so I said, you know what? I like to push back. I'll get more creative with some of the names. I just don't want to call him president. He is our president, however. That was another discussion. People say, he's not my president. I disagree with people say that because I think it's important to recognize where we are and who we live with. And he's the guy that we elected, this country, unfortunately elected president with all of its problems around the election and so on. So I'm still calling him our president, but I rarely refer to him as president here. I'd rather call him things like Pumpkin Spiced Stalin or Kim Jong-un or President Donald McDonald or Farty 7. See, I've got a great list here now that I'll try to reference more often because there's always going to be way too much to say about dictator Donald. He pardoned a guy yesterday who is the richest man in crypto. The guy had pled guilty to money laundering. His crypto exchange is called Binance. His name is Changpeng Zhao, and he had struck a deal with the Trump family's crypto startup. Because, you know, Don the Con has got this going on and probably enriched him more than almost anything else he's ever done on any building he's ever had people build and not pay for. Moving on, the West Wing is now just rubble. Looks like it got bombed. It's been taken down. People are shocked by it. Fuckboy Von Clownface is acting like it was always the plan, and that is where we are right now on it. Moving on to other headlines, let's see. The vice president, that's J.D. Vance. I need to come up with all the nicknames for him. He was in the Middle East, and he said yesterday an international security force would take the lead on disarming Hamas, and that the president, apparently he thinks, has rejected Israeli aspirations for annexing the West Bank. All right. He's rejected it. Oh, so now I'm sure they won't annex the West Bank, but I fear they will, because I'd rather just let's look into seeing what actually happens, not what gets said. Senate Democrats yesterday blocked a Republican bill to pay essential federal workers, and Republicans blocked Democratic bills that would pay a wider swath. So there you go. That happened yesterday. In Texas, the company Motorola won a $7 million contract to modernize the Care County's emergency radio system. Of course, that's the county in Texas where that deadly flood hit and killed all those young people and more. Over 100 people, I think, died on that July 4th when systems faltered there. So I didn't even know Motorola was still a company, but I'm glad they're resourcing it. For the first time in hundreds of years, the leaders of the Roman Catholic and Anglican churches, Pope Leo and King Charles, prayed together. Wow. What did they pray for? Hair? What did they, I wonder, no, they're more thoughtful than that. I'm sure they prayed for world peace. Did we get it? Apparently, China is now on pace to surpass the U.S. in nuclear power by 2030. And last night we talked a lot about the future of energy, and I got bored by most of it, but there's a lot of really smart listeners that can talk about energy. It's a very important issue, obviously. I got bored and then I got interested again. We were talking about fusion. We were talking about sodium ion batteries. We were talking about thorium as an alternative to uranium in nuclear power. I think it was mentioned by Jim Babowski, the great Bobo. That's my friend Jim. All right. Yesterday, Mayor Eric Adams recently called Andrew Cuomo a snake and a liar, now then endorsed him. It's totally normal, I guess. In an unusual collaboration, prisoners at Guantanamo Bay Detention Facility sent portraits of themselves to their families through the U.S. military and Red Cross. Thought that was interesting and worth mentioning. The U.S. flew Air Force B-1 bombers near Venezuela yesterday, stepping up pressure on the president there, Nicolas Maduro, only days after other American warplanes carried out an attack demonstration near the South American country. These two B-1 bombers took off at an Air Force base in Texas and flew near Venezuela. They remained in international airspace, but they're still flexing their muscles, taking their dicks out. I don't know. This shit happening in Venezuela, Marco Rubio's secret war, is real worrisome. And I think when MAGA finds out about it, they're going to act like they care. A new study, this is very important, finds out that mRNA coronavirus vaccines apparently prolong the life of cancer patients. Health records of more than 1,000 cancer patients receiving immunotherapy for lung and skin cancer showed they gained additional benefit after their vaccination. This is a really big development, and on the big list of worst things the administration has done this year, Steve Bennett at Maddow Blog says the abandonment of mRNA research is a top contender. So there you go. That is a really big and important story worth mentioning. Let's not forget the horrible things that they're doing, especially when we learn news of the consequences. Speaking of consequences, the United States State Department, run by our Orange Cheeto, has removed an online portal for reporting alleged human rights violations by foreign military units supplied with American weapons. We don't want that. We don't want to know any foreign military units using American weapons that are violating human rights. Let's not know. Let's look the other way. The Human Rights Reporting Gateway is what it was called. That is a formal tip line to the U.S. government. Well, now it's shut down, like a whole bunch of other very, very important international agencies and diplomatic efforts. It's all being shut down. There you go. Thank you, Marco Rubio and the rest. In the midst of a federal government shutdown, the U.S. government's gross national debt surpassed $38 trillion yesterday. We did it. A record number that highlights the accelerating accumulation of debt on America's balance sheet. Also, the fastest accumulation of $1 trillion in debt outside of the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. hit $37 trillion in gross national debt in August this year. So, wow, we're really racking it up. Next time there's a conversation about parties and fiscal responsibility, remind them of this. All right, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you today. Now it's time to get to the sound I've got, the clip show. Let's do it. Kick it off with some jokes. How about it? This is a great joke from Colbert at the top of his monologue on last night's Late Show on CBS.
And I welcome you to our continuing coverage of Trump Smash 25. This week on Trump Smash, what Trump Smash is East Wing of White House? Why Trump Smash? For his ridiculous ballroom. As of this morning, the East Wing looked like a rotisserie chicken your dog got into. That is very upsetting to look at. I realize that. And you know the administration knows that because today the Secret Service closed access to the Ellipse Park, which is a public park from which journalists had been capturing live images of the East Wing demolition. Well, that makes sense. If none of it's on camera, they can just claim the East Wing hanged itself in prison. Now...
Oh, that's a great joke. That is an excellent joke by Colbert. Gets us started. Now let's head over to Fox News, where Bret Baier tried to get the governor of Illinois, who I'm glad he had on the show because he got to say these other things. He tried to corner him and talk about crime in Chicago as a way to defend and deflect about sending in the military to Chicago, and J.B. Pritzker wasn't having it.
Why does Chicago have the highest murder rate of all the big cities?
Well, we are not in the top 30 in terms of our murder rate. Indeed,
well,
our murder rate it has been cut in half over the last 4 years, and every year it's gone down by double digits. And if you look at all of the violent crime over the last 4 years,
here's a map.
They've all gone down.
U.S. cities, 17.47 per 100,000 population. Chicago is number one over Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Phoenix, Los Angeles, New York, and San Diego.
What I'm explaining to you is
you're
when
talking
you want to
about
fight
violent
crime. Look, you can pull statistics up.
No,
I can
these are
too.
murders.
I'm explaining to you that our murder rate has been cut in half. And very importantly, Brett, and you got to hear this, very importantly, we've been doing the things that are necessary to bring crime down, right? We've invested in community violence interruption. We've invested in police. I've added more state police than any governor in quite a long time. It's very important that we do both of those things and more to invest in our communities so that we bring crime down. We're doing that. You know who's doing the opposite? Donald Trump.
Yeah, there was a lot more to that. By the way, apparently Barry Weiss, who's now running CBS News, is considering bringing that guy Bret Baier in to be the anchor of CBS News, which mind-blowing, and all credibility would be lost, or a lot of it, I think, if Bret Baier took the helm, or it would become the most popular network news show in America as a result of a white man being back. They've tried enough people of color and women. Bring in Bret Baier. Anyway, all right, let's go to Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine yesterday, trying to set the record straight on who's to blame for the government shutdown.
He has to meet with the president. The president scheduled a meeting, then canceled it. Then he agreed to have a meeting on September 29th. And as soon as the Democrats walked out of the office, he put up AI-generated videos of them wearing sombreros and talking in funny accents about things that they didn't say. We've elected a middle schooler to be president. It's ridiculous. And since then, he hasn't engaged. He had time last week to have a meeting in the Oval Office to promise $20 billion to the president of Argentina if that president's party succeeded in midterm elections. But he doesn't have time to meet with congressional leadership. He had time yesterday to have a lunch on the East Lawn of the White House to show the destruction of the East Wing of the White House to our Republican Senate colleagues. But he doesn't have time to sit down and meet with congressional leadership to get the government open. The Democrats renewed the request yesterday. The president's on the verge of traveling abroad to Asia. Before you go, let's sit down and work this out. The president this morning refused.
Shocking that he's going to leave his construction project behind. And now let's get to CNN's former Pentagon reporter who reported at the Pentagon for a long time. It's Barbara Starr, and she's talking to the guy that apparently was the Pentagon reporter before her, Wolf Blitzer. He likes to bring that up. He's like, we're both very old.
Barbara Starr, you and I are old friends, colleagues. We covered the Pentagon together when I was the Pentagon correspondent and moved over to cover the White House. You replaced me, did an amazing job. How do you see these right-wing outlets who are now part of the press corps at the Pentagon that both of us used to cover on a day-to-day basis, me during the first Gulf War? What's your reaction when you see what's going on?
Well, first of all, I just absolutely reject the Pentagon's assertion that there is a new Pentagon press corps that they have announced. That's not how the world works in this country with a free press. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of journalists that continue to cover the Pentagon who did not sign up to the new restrictive rules, who are continuing to do their jobs every day. The Pentagon's gone so far as to say these journalists, the traditional journalists, self-deported from the Pentagon. How ridiculous is that? Deportation is a message point, and it indicates criminal behavior. That is not what is going on here. So reporters are continuing to report, and they're breaking scoops every single day from outside the Pentagon. And Mr. Hegseth may find that he is going to continue to struggle with, looking at his morning reading and finding breaking news stories that he has no idea are even coming at him. I think it's a shame, Wolf. There is plenty of room for new media out there, new credible media emerging in this country. There's plenty of room to discuss the question of the lack of public trust in some media, plenty of room to move ahead into a more modern age. And that is what many news organizations are already doing. But to, hurl insults and to rely on political influencers, it's not journalism, and it's not what the First Amendment and the free press is really all about in this country. It's about protecting reporters, not political influencers.
Yeah, the serious journalists who cover the Pentagon refused to sign that document demanded by the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, that they report only what the Pentagon publicly releases in press releases, and can't do any really serious investigative journalism, which is what we all do.
All right. There you go. Enough slapping yourself on the back there, Wolf. Do you know that Wolf Blitzer, fun fact, once gave me his seats to the Washington Wizards, and I went on a date with a man? Anyway, ask me about it sometime. Okay, so now I want to share with you another clip. This one is coming to us from Mamdani. This is Zohran Mamdani responding to something that happened yesterday on the radio when this right-wing radio host had Andrew Cuomo on. This is what happened.
Rosenberg's radio show, your opponent Andrew Cuomo said, "God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mamdani in the seat?" End quote. Rosenberg responded by saying he'd be cheering. Andrew Cuomo said, quote, "That's another problem." I want to get your reaction.
This is disgusting. This is Andrew Cuomo's final moments in public life, and he's choosing to spend them making racist attacks on the person who would be the first Muslim to lead this city. And frankly, it's not about me. It's about the fact that there are more than 1 million Muslims who live in New York City. And to have our faith be smeared and slandered by someone who at one point was considered a leader in the Democratic Party showcases the fact that bigotry and racism is not exclusively a Republican problem. It is also a problem within our own party. And it is time that we turn the page on Andrew Cuomo and those that would tolerate this kind of rhetoric from him as well.
Yeah, I can hear the passion and emotion in your voice. It's personal for you.
It is. I mean, to describe myself and describe Muslims in this manner, it begs the question of why this kind of rhetoric is acceptable when we're speaking about Muslim New Yorkers. Because all Muslim New Yorkers want is to feel a sense of equality and respect that every New Yorker deserves. And even that is being denied by the former governor.
All right. Hopefully the future mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, right there. And now I want to give you an illustration of something I and plenty of others talk about all the time. The fact that way too many Americans are deeply concerned and terrified of things that aren't real. Conspiracy theories, things they've been told, they've been duped about, and not worried about real things, real threats on the threat matrix, if you will. And nowhere is there a better example than when it comes to climate science and climate change. In this case, the new head of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, not concerned about even denying, even though he didn't used to, the causes of climate change, man-made climate change, and now saying, let's look into things that aren't really concerning, because, we like to listen to the far-right loony conspiracy theorists out there. And so we're not worried about climate change, but we are worried about, wait, what's this? Chemtrails? Contrails?
Concerned Americans have urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly.
All right. Okay, thank you. God, it's enraging. Yeah, I need some jokes. I need some laughs. Hurry, Seth Meyers to the rescue.
Today was the 22nd day of the government shutdown, and if you're wondering how much longer it'll go on, they've started taking down the White House. Construction workers have broken ground on the new White House ballroom. Either that or Pete Hegseth should not have driven home last night. While speaking yesterday to congressional Republicans in the White House Rose Garden, President Trump said that the noise from the East Wing demolition was music to my ears, though based on his taste in music, I'm not sure that's a good thing. President Trump confirmed yesterday he wants the Justice Department to pay him $230 million in compensation for its criminal investigations of him, and added, quote, any money that I would get, I would give to charity. Come on, man, that's obviously just her stage name. President Trump's nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel withdrew his nomination last night after Politico reported on a text chain in which he claimed to have a Nazi streak, though I don't think Nazi comes in streak form. It's like if the waiter told you tonight's special is the Dover sole with capers and a white wine sauce and a little streak of poison, you wouldn't say, ooh, capers. According to a new report from The Atlantic, more than a third of new ICE recruits have failed the agency's personal fitness test. So if you're looking for a good place to hide from ICE, try upstairs. New York Times columnist John McWhorter recently published a list of the 10 old television series every kid needs to watch. I'll get right on that, said the one kid who reads the Times opinion section. Producers have announced that a revival of the musical Cats is set to open next year on Broadway in Mayor Adams' latest scheme to solve the rat problem. The brewer of Busch Light is planning to host the largest private gathering of people named Hunter. The previous record was held by every lacrosse team.
All right. Good stuff. I love that. I love that little bit he does at the beginning of Late Night with Seth Meyers on NBC. That is your clip show. Those are your headlines. Can't do any of it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That is the place to go. November 6th, you can find me in Virginia with some of my friends from the stand-up community. I will be there to watch John Carroll perform, johncarroll.org, but he's having an album release party there, and I've been mentioning it only at the end of the show when I'm plugging John's music, but I want to mention it here and more because I hope to see you there if anybody wants to come. Thursday, November 6th in Purcellville, Virginia. John Carroll's band will be performing 7 p.m., and maybe I'll do a live hangout from there because it's going to be on Thursday night. All right, let's get to my guest. She is one of the most impressive people I know. She is an inspiring leader, an Iraq war veteran, dedicated public servant, former chief executive officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and a very good friend of mine. I always love to catch up with Allison Jaslow, and yesterday was no exception. A lot of people really liked this interview that were watching it live, and you can watch it on YouTube or Substack. If you haven't subscribed, you should. It'll give you alerts when I'm going live with guests. And so let's do it right now with the inspiring, the brilliant, the always awesome Allison Jaslow. Very happy to have my good friend Allison Jaslow joining me. She is, of course, an Iraq war veteran, public servant, and the former CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, what I would argue is the most important organization, nonprofit, advocating for this generation of veterans who fought specifically, of course, in Iraq and Afghanistan. But you advocate for all kinds of veterans from all different conflicts. If you served, you're welcome at IAVA. And I got a lot to talk with you about, but just pulling back the curtain, Allison and I are good friends. We're very good friends. We confide in each other. She's been there many times for me on all range of issues, and I've tried to show up for her. And so just should be mentioned that I recruited you for friendship after I saw how impressive your career. You had a very impressive career. You also ran congressional campaigns. You were chief of staff of a congresswoman. I mean, you've done so many things. So I was like, I think I need to be friends with this person. And I called you.
Yeah, I have been busy. I feel like I'm hardwired to make the most amount of difference every day that I'm here on this earth. So in individual lives, but also I've had the great privilege to be able to do so at scale.
Do you ever then feel like you're having do you feel bad about having a lazy day where you aren't creating change and doing things that impact society, the world, your own health? Because I do.
Yeah. I mean, I
want to feel human.
I actually had like a little bit of a rough patch last week because I'm, as you know, wrestling with what is the best and highest use of my time and talents right now at this important time that we find ourselves in our country, and if I don't feel like I'm making the impact that I know I can make, it weighs heavy on me. And so
you're in transition between being chief executive officer of Iraq and Afghanistan and Veterans of America and whatever's next. And it could be so many different things because of your background. But for someone like yourself, and I think we're similar this way, being in transition is to a certain extent feeling not in full control and not making the kind of impact that you want to make on a regular basis with a kind of mission focused idea. And I share that, although my mission is all over the place, but I understand why that's hard. We've been talking about it. So I get it, obviously, but I want to ask you, based on your background, whatever you do next, I'm excited to see, of course, but based on your background, I want to talk to you about several different things. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because people focus a lot on military issues and veterans issues with you, as they should, and you should be invited into any conversation dealing with those issues. And I'm going to get to them. But people don't, I think, ask you enough publicly. I have obviously privately talked about politics, specifically Democratic politics, because you've worked on different campaigns. And I wanted to just get your general take on where the Democratic Party is today. You've seen a lot. You've worked within the machine. You've worked in Washington. You worked on campaigns. And I just want to get your kind of general ideology, your general consensus on, today's Democratic Party with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries on one end. And then you get candidates like Mamdani and Graham Plattner on the other end. And then you've got a whole bunch of, I think, really effective and influential folks in the House that could eat, many of which I think would be great presidents. What are your thoughts on the Democratic Party today?
I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of cross pressures as it relates to the party. I think there's still a great deal of disbelief that there was a loss in 2024. And then, I think that it's clearly a generational moment or a struggle between generations. You see a lot of aging House members. I think the House of Representatives has lost 3 sitting members of Congress, have died in their seats because they stayed there so long, just this year alone on the Democratic side. Which is true
in terms of this, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court, Joe Biden. It seems to be a very Democrat. It's affected Democrats probably more, one might argue. I don't think Republicans don't hold on forever. Chuck Grassley and plenty of others, certainly Mitch McConnell. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, and this is usually the party, it's the same party of JFK and Barack Obama. You look at our last Democratic presidents, they were all very youthful. And so it's kind of incongruent with the larger ethos of the party. I personally, made an intentional decision to be a Democrat myself. My grandfather, when I was growing up, was if you care about the military and our national security, you should vote Republican. So I went off to college on my ROTC scholarship thinking that I should be a Republican. But then I got perspective. One of the best things my mom did for us as, I come from a working class family, but she was smart enough to move into a public school district. And, I shudder to think what my life would be like if I didn't have those great public schools, especially a good student body to sort of keep me a little bit on the rails after, but maybe your listeners don't know that my, alcoholic father died by suicide when I was 13. And that's a tough thing to go through. I tried to avoid as hard as possible feeling those feelings, but it definitely creeps up in other ways. But I think being around good kids at a good school really helped me a lot. Once my dad died, we also got Social Security benefits, which go to dependents in addition to seniors in this country to help people make ends meet who come from working class backgrounds. And, my stepdad was also a grocery store worker who was had a really good contract from the UFCW. And once I got to college and I realized all of that, I made an intentional decision to become a Democrat because it was a matter of integrity to me. Democrats were the party that instituted Social Security. They were the party for working people, or at least back in 2001 when I had this aha in my life. And so I think one of the things that it's very widely reported in the New York Times and other publications is whether we've lost our way as it relates to making sure that we are actually standing up for working people, which is two parts. It's not just in the policies you put forward, but if you don't connect with people, if they don't believe that you understand their lived experience, it's hard to inspire them to vote for you too, And so I think that's why you're seeing, some of the candidates resonating the way that they are, even if they're outsiders or outside of the box, because they vibe. I know you're hurting, or I know how hard you fought to do X, Y, or Z for your family. And I think people are really thirsting for that in addition to Faces of the Future right now.
Let me ask you, that's all really interesting, much of which I want to follow up on, but I want to ask you specifically about some of these new candidates and just trying to understand the process, because we hear people use certain words and language around the process to find a candidate or the process to run for office. Specifically in Maine, you've got this guy, Graham Plattner. And a lot of people are saying about him and other candidates that they were made in a lab, that consultants kind of created them. There's all kinds of ways someone might come to the decision to run for office, especially locally, like Board of Education, where you're not getting paid, much less town council or Congress or U.S. Senate. Lots of reasons that you want to make a difference. Good reasons, I think, that you could argue. There's all kinds of insidious, evil ones as well. But in this case, people are saying that consultants kind of created him. They worked with Bernie Sanders people and they found this guy. And then my understanding is, they come to the guy, people approach him and say, listen, have you ever thought about running for office? And he's like, let me do my Graham Plattner. I'm Graham Plattner. I'm the most manly guy I've ever heard talk ever. I make Will Arnett seem feminine. The point is that they came to him. And I don't think that's a terrible idea, because on the other end, my friend Jay Alcovan, who's a very smart lawyer and comedian, is thinking about running for Congress. He's talking about it openly. He would give anybody, talking about his podcast, he would love if someone came to him and said, we can raise the money. How does it work? How did it work in Graham Plattner? How cynical should we be about the process?
So traditionally, the committees in Washington, D.C. have recruited, at least for the top races in the country, the most competitive ones, where each side has an opportunity to either win a competitive open seat or knock off a vulnerable incumbent. Sometimes they're successful at doing that well. Sometimes they do a terrible job at it.
The committees, just to be clear, the committees being the DCCC for House seats, and then the Senate candidate committee, what its equivalent, which
the DSCC, yes, and there's also the NRCC and the NRSC.
Okay, so and those are very heavily in. Could you just? I'm sorry, but I don't know that much about those organizations. I understand a little bit about what you're saying here, but are those very much run by the electeds themselves, or are they run by outside operatives that are impacted by special interests whose money they raise? Like, how much of who runs those committees?
I mean, they're staffed by political professionals. So individuals who have a lot of experience specifically on campaigns, and many of them out in campaigns across the country before they find their way to Washington, D.C. Leadership is heavily involved. Elected leadership on each side is heavily involved in fundraising for the committees, but also selecting leadership for the committees too. So, there's an elected member who's the chair of the DCCC currently, and there's an elected member who's the chair of the DFCC right now, and leadership put them there. There was a time when the DCCC toyed with voting from the caucus who that chair was. For a variety of reasons, that didn't work out so well. But then, those two leaders spent a lot of time raising resources, not just for committee operations, but also for their independent expenditure arms and, helping to raise for their preferred candidates as well.
You see one example, I think I'm just read about it, that like Chuck Schumer and the Senate, the DSCC have picked Janet Mills, the current governor. They're backing her to run for Senate. And Graham Plattner also running for Senate. He's more of got the backing of consultants. He's raised a lot of money. He's this great candidate. Bernie Sanders is obviously went to this rally, filled up a whole arena with him, give him a lot of RNA, all that. So, but that's, it seems like one example of something we're seeing play out right this minute. The Senate, old Chuck Schumer has picked an old woman. She's 77.
She is 77.
I'm ageist when it comes to being a representative, an elected representative. I'm ageist. But just on that, not on pilot, not on teacher, not on law partner, not on electrician. I just had a guy come fix my washer and dryer. Dude was like 80. He was amazing. He killed himself, but I'm sitting the washer fell on him, but anyway, I'm ageist.
Yeah. I mean, I think something that many in the party are reflecting right now is that, we just experienced rationalizing what we felt like was the safe choice, but that there are also, some questions. And I say that the safe choice going into 2020.
Yeah, Joe Biden.
Of course, many people thought at the time that Biden would just be a transition president. So I think that gave some people peace of mind. Well, it turns out maybe you struggle at a certain point to even make good decisions for yourself, as many people have experienced with their aging parents. And so I think what some people are reflecting on right now, whether it's in Maine or elsewhere, is should we be rationalizing some of the safer choices just because it's people who have won statewide before, if it might not go well when they potentially win statewide again, if they survive, in some cases, the most difficult race of their life. Federal races are a totally different ballgame than some of these races that have been.
Oh, that's an interesting thing to try to explore too. And just to be clear, I have followed the Graham Plattner controversies, the things that he said in the past, his tattoos. I've seen a lot of people I know and trust say, I'm done, I'm out, cancel that dude. There's no possible way, no daylight for that guy. And then I've seen other people like Amanda Lippman, who's run and started more probably successful candidates that run for something than almost anybody say, listen, we get it. This is in the past and so on. So I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that? Have you paid attention to this Graham Plattner and whether or not you think he's a viable candidate, or how much, I don't know, you would judge his quote integrity and honesty, I guess?
I'd say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I have paid attention in part because he really has resonated online, but also most vet candidates catch my eye. And he is a veteran of the post 9/11 wars, which I think has been a part of the discussion as some pieces of his background have come out as well. Because I don't think I think his wartime experience impacted him. But I would say a couple of things. I mean, one, there is only so much I know too. And so I wouldn't want to overly judge somebody who I only know from a distance here. Obviously, the political process, it can be really brutal, but there's also, a reason why a healthy primary is good. It can challenge candidates, challenge their background so things don't come out in the general election, but also challenge them to have to fight through all of that before they get to the general election as well. Right. And I would say two things. One, what I admire is I've seen many politicians not own up for things that they so clearly have done before. And I admire somebody who's willing to take accountability. There is such a lack of accountability, not just in our politics, but American society today. It's kind of refreshing, even if we all have to step back and think about what place in life was he in when he did some of the things that he has done or have been exposed. And then the other thing I would say is as some of this stuff is playing out, he's still drawing huge crowds in Maine. So it feels like something that like some of the rest of us just need to let the voters in Maine decide at the end of the day. The voters who have, especially the Democratic voters who've been trying to elevate better leadership than they feel like they have in Susan Collins for so many years and haven't, have had difficulty doing it. And so I kind of, want to stay at the water's edge to a certain degree because it's really for the people of Maine to decide.
All 9 of them. So all white. There's so many hilarious jokes about his racism, whether it be overt or subtle, and things he's said on Reddit, I think mainly in the past, much less, you could certainly consider these tattoos that are supposedly Nazi tattoos to be racist, but he acts like he says he didn't know. Regardless, the fact is he grew up in Maine and he grew up a certain way, as you can imagine. And then he went off and served and lived and fought in foreign countries, and that'll change a person in a lot of ways. That's for sure. And culture person, and he worked in D.C. He's had a lot of experiences. I don't know what to think about him, but I think you make a lot of good points. And I want to move on to ask you about another hot. That's kind of the thing, too. He's kind of hot in terms of, I don't know if he's like sexy. I guess he's sexy because he's like a veteran. Although he pulled that shirt up, and I was like, oof, couple donut. Maybe do some push-ups, Graham. But, he's killed.
I think it's the alpha energy, Pete.
Yeah.
It's the alpha energy.
The energy is, we can joke about it or we can talk about it, how it matters for men and women. It matters that I'm watching a primary. I won't even say where. You and I actually talked about this primary, and it's between these 2 women that are running for Congress as Democrats. And one of them has more alpha energy. Doesn't mean in any way she's more qualified. Doesn't mean she's better. Could argue both make her worse, but there's appeal to voters with that energy, right? I'm not just making that up. That's what it's not necessary for the office. It helps the campaign. I don't know if it matters in governance. I think it's a little bit silly myself. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's possible for the citizenry to desire different things at different times from their elected leaders. And I think that there is such thirst for real leadership right now in this moment that's only going to come from people who project that, I think you can be a good representative and not necessarily be capable of leading troops into battle. But I think that this is a time where people want people who are capable of leading troops into battle. That's a moment that we're in right now. And it takes a certain personality to be able to, I think, give off that confidence and that energy that says, follow me, I will show you the way, and to actually get people to follow.
There are so many other issues. I've got a whole list of things to ask Allison, and I'm really happy that you're here, and talking to you is always fun and interesting. One of the smartest people I know. But let me just try to tick through my little notes, my little list, to get your general take and inform us a bit. First of all, how do you feel and what do you think about seeing military on the streets of America and the ways that they're being used? I don't know how much you differentiate between Army National Guard and Marines or federal agents in general, ICE agents and so on. But what are your thoughts on what we're seeing play out in several different cities in this country right now? And what do you hear from your active duty friends and veteran friends about that? Because I won't say what I think.
I think privately, people who I know who are still serving, who are still young enough to do another 10 years, but are also at retirement age, is really questioning whether they want to stay in any longer. And so I think something I'm really concerned about, and I can speak to personal experience here, is it's in times like this when people are serving under terrible leadership, it's when the good leaders get out. It's not when the bad leaders get out or the people who don't have any other option who get out. It's the people who are good leaders and who do have the option to have a second career in the private sector who get out. And that'll have cascading effects if it starts to happen, which it probably is already. As it relates to the Guard,
I would say,
I understand why people.
By the way, can we just unpack good leader? Because in this current situation, a good leader might be someone who doesn't want to take or follow an order that he or she knows is bad, is unlawful, could get that person in trouble. Maybe the president's he's covered for everything now by the Supreme Court, but this general might not be. This this captain might not be. And sometimes I feel like when you're saying good leader, I'm not necessarily sure what that means. But I feel like it means that person versus son of a sycophant, if you will, to the dear leader.
I mean, I'd say a couple of things. One, my definition of a leader is somebody who takes responsibility for developing potential in people and organizations. And I think there's ways that you can do that in a military context and elsewhere. When it comes to ethics, listen, I have a reasonable degree of confidence that most leaders in the military aren't going to execute unlawful orders. But then, you and I talked about this the other day, Pete, but are there leaders in there who, in this moment that demands of all of us to be courageous, in the gray areas, are they just going to stay mum, or are they going to have the courage to make waves? Are they going to put their relationship with their superior over their relationship with their subordinates? Are they going to put their ability to get that next star on their shoulder above, standing up for what's right in a moment like the one that we're living through?
We've all seen military leaders resign publicly, write a letter, why they did it. But it's about a disagreement, maybe. It's about integrity or any number of things. But it's not because we will hear from them often, because they're not worried about losing their entire retirement and being savaged by name by the president. My feeling is the other day, this guy, Admiral Alvin Halsey, resigned less than a year into his tenure. He was the guy in charge of the region where all these attacks on drug boats that were being told they could be fishermen, for all we know. Military commander overseeing the Pentagon's escalating attacks, and he hasn't said anything. And Pete Hegseth has made no mention of any friction. And one has to wonder if the reason why he isn't speaking out, he resigned because he doesn't want to be in trouble. And he doesn't want to carry out these orders potentially. He doesn't want to do this. But also we're not hearing from him because he knows probably, if he hasn't already been threatened implicitly, that he could lose his entire retirement and could be threatened and could be prosecuted because of the vindictive government. And I'm trying to just give him and others just some grace with the fact that this is the most vindictive, revengeful federal government you could ever imagine in our lifetime. And you have to wonder if that's at play. Sorry for talking so long, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reasonable fear. So maybe we'll hear more from him. I think he's set to retire at the end of the year. Maybe we'll hear more from him then. You did see Secretary Hegseth praise him once this news came out. So that could be an attempt to, save face externally. We'll see. It would be nice to hear his perspective at some point as to, what was going down. And I think everybody who says that this is extraordinarily unusual, I think we should listen to them and take it as a warning sign. I mean, there are other things that have been, concerning about the administration. Something like this where, there could be unlawful orders that are being given and Congress not necessarily stepping up and asking the right questions. It sounds like maybe they're doing that behind closed doors, but feels like a oversight hearing situation to me, but that's not happening. That's
why it's important to have majorities so you can have those hearings and investigations. I got to ask you, of course, just about Hegseth and the general direction he's been taking, and the Department of War, even that, has been taking that horrible spectacle when he brought all the military generals and admirals, leaders from all over the world, and to just listen to him give a fucking TED talk, which was awful. It was the most cringy thing I think I've seen with my eyeballs in my life.
Yeah.
No beardos, no weirdos, no fatties. It seems like we don't really want women. We don't, certainly not in combat roles. That's explicit. We don't want black folks. We've fired all the black and brown, it would seem, leadership and women. If you're gay, keep it to yourself. And if you're trans, you're out. How am I doing at recapping what seems to be this reversal of what I would call major progress in the military? And one could argue to its, well, to its great effectiveness. All the people that have been serving, black folks, brown folks, obviously women in combat roles, as well as LGBT community. You're of two of those categories. I'll let people guess which two. He is not a black man. Allison, what are your thoughts on the reversal of this ideology and what it means for the military right now, what you're hearing?
I mean, first of all, the time to put an end to all of this was when he was being confirmed by the Senate. I remain to this day very disappointed in the Senate because people were distracted by a lot of aspects of his background, but the fact that he openly and passionately lobbied to get convicted war criminals pardoned is the most concerning part about his bio. We have a Secretary of Defense right now who seemingly thinks war crimes are okay. And oh, by the way, check out what's happening outside of Venezuela right now. I'm not surprised. But, let me break into pieces a couple of things that you mentioned, Pete. First of all, I know that he made a lot of headlines when he fired, not just generals, but flag officers early on in the administration. The reality is he has the right to. If you don't see eye to eye with your generals, and I don't know what he felt like he didn't see eye to eye with them on, I'll give you an example. When President Obama did not see eye to eye with General McChrystal as it related to the Afghanistan war, he stepped down or was asked to step down by the president. And so is it unusual that he cleaned house the way that he did? Sure. But the reason I mention that too is I don't want the rest of us to be distracted by, I think, the things that are super consequential in my mind. You mentioned beforehand about the National Guard. Yes, they're being used, some would say, to, intimidate blue cities. Some would say some would argue to address problems that went overlooked for many, many years. But the reality is I think we can all see that it's a little bit of a political stunt at the same time. And what we're doing is we're taking National Guard troops off missions and also out of their civilian jobs to execute these missions. And to me, the stuff that's getting headlines around these deployments is sort of overlooking the brass tacks consequences of us manipulating the military in the way that we are right now. To include bringing all these generals in for a meeting that was meant to be a performance, it feels like what mission were they supposed to be standing watch over that we pulled them off of on a moment's notice for, a message that could have been sent over Zoom or via email? And to me, I think, I don't know what it is in, especially the press or, some parts of the population. I feel like a lot of people were really scared that Pete Hegseth and the president were going to make them pledge loyalty to the commander in chief and not the Constitution. And I wish we actually had more conversations about literally, how did we disrupt our national security to help somebody who is so blatantly insecure feel better about himself and the authority that he has over all of these generals, and senior leaders. There had to have been national security consequences. We literally intentionally made ourselves vulnerable across the globe to make two men feel better about themselves. I just wish we had more of a conversation like that, Such
a great point. It really is. And it's all of them. And I really appreciate all of that. I got to ask you at least one more question about military related matters. And it doesn't have to do with, I don't think, Hegseth. It doesn't have to do with Trump. It has to do with just the general morale that you're hearing from people inside the military. Are they all gung-ho? I mean, and what are the other issues that we're not talking about that you worked on for so long at IAVA and before that veterans are dealing with right now that are also going, I don't know, if they're with the government being shut down, that affects a lot of people in the military, and some of them are vital and is quote essential, and other than them aren't. But my understanding is that nobody's getting paid. It would seem that morale. I don't want to make any assumptions. What do you hear?
I'd say a couple of things based on personal relationships that I have in the military. I do think that there are a lot of people who are experiencing distress right now, not wondering whether they want to continue to serve in this military under this leadership for a variety of different reasons. You know, you mentioned beforehand, like there hasn't been a whole lot of like respect towards women coming from the Pentagon as it relates to, you know, women who are currently serving, but also women who have served. You know, I saw combat before Pete Hegseth. You know, he's a contemporary of mine, and his outdated views, you know, I'm not sure why he either possesses them or is pandering to folks who have those views. But it's it honestly like doesn't even get me worked up. It makes my eyes roll. Cause like he's fundamentally like turning a blind eye to the types of wars that we found ourselves in post 9/11 and find ourselves in now, which like, do you know how much fighting is happening by drones right now? Do you think you need to bench press 200 pounds to be able to fly a drone? That doesn't mean we shouldn't still, you know, place a priority on physical fitness in the military, but like I feel like he's literally living in a different time with some of the actions that he's taken. But I think, you know, if you're a woman who's still serving, it's like, my dude, like I deployed how many times, and like you're going to decide to like flip the script on me. But I think that there are men who are leaders of character who probably have to really dig deep to go into work every day. And some of them are going to choose to drop those retirement papers. And like I said before, like that just means over time, you know, we're going to degrade not only is morale potentially going down inside the military, we'll degrade the overall health and wellness of the all volunteer force. And like that should concern everybody, because if we're going to still be a nation that's going to fight our wars with all volunteers, you want everybody to not only just like, you know, stay in as long and to lead a professional military who are good leaders, who are committed to this country and their fellow countrymen who are fighting alongside them. But we also we have to worry about like who's going to join in this environment. Like even if the numbers still stay up, like who are we attracting into the military right now? You know, are we attracting the right people in? Or are we attracting people who think it's great that we have a SecDef, who thinks war crimes are okay?
Glad you came back to, you can't say it enough. Just two quick reactions. The reason you said you're not quite sure why Pete Hegseth has views specifically around women the way he does. My understanding is that he was a member of this guy, Doug Wilson's church. And I took a deep dive into this whole great documented journalism about this guy. He's the guy who believes that women shouldn't be allowed to vote, that households should vote. And so we know Pete Hegseth is, in my opinion, a radicalized Christian nationalist. He's very overt about it. Speaking of tattoos, you might want to take a look at his. But the other issue, and I covered this for years at SiriusXM, I interviewed so many different guests and experts around it, paid close attention to the hearings, was that in the military, there's an epidemic of sex violence and harassment and abuse, specifically against women, overwhelmingly by men. It's an epidemic. That's the word that they used. Bipartisan hearings were held, including by Joni Ernst, who herself is a survivor of rape. And of course, Kirsten Gillibrand led on this. I mean, I watched those hearings. It's a bad thing. There's all kinds of different reforms that they wanted to pass. They couldn't pass. They wanted civilian oversight. They couldn't get it. They said military oversight. I don't know if anything got much better in the military as a result of this issue. I do know that Pete Hegseth has been accused by several women of terrible things, including his own mother. So if you want to have any impact on that issue, which we know is a huge issue, you don't put that guy in charge. That's what I want to say.
You know, thankfully, there were some serious reforms that were made to the military justice system a few years back. Joni Ernst was, in my view, it's something that Kirsten Gillibrand fought for many years. And, you know, Joni Ernst, though, ended up, I think, helping it get over the finish line once she joined the fight.
She was the key vote. Yeah. She was the key holdout. So in the end, you went back to blame. You're going to blame anybody most. Maybe it's her.
Yeah. And I dream about a world in which Hegseth's nomination was pulled and she was put in as Secretary of Defense. She and I, of course, don't share all of the same views, but I think she would have taken the job more seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Like, honestly, I wish more people were talking about how, like, we have an unserious president and an unserious SecDef. You know, I understand that, like, there are other concerns about them, but at the end of the day, to me, like, they're just unserious people. And I do think what concerns me, something that I've long held the view of, is if you build a culture that makes people think that sexual assault or sexual harassment or worse is okay, then they're more likely to do it. If you build a culture that sends a loud and clear message that it is not okay, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But that's what like we had been working towards here, was to make sure that there was like effective accountability when, you know, units were having serious issues with this, et cetera.
That's also part of doing that is having some of these DEI, as cringe as they might be and as overwrought as they might be, and as they sometimes aren't always effective. But it's not only teaching right from wrong. Like I needed to be taught, I still need to be taught that certain things that I say and do are not appropriate, and it's not instinctual. So it's important that someone tell me, and it would be great if they didn't tell me when I do it to the person, as opposed to in some kind of programming. So like teaching this, kind of
whatever you want to call it, you know, it's building a culture of mutual respect.
There you go.
And I mean, I think that that's as important for the military, especially because of the consequences of not doing so in an institution like that. But any organization, like, don't we all want to work in an organization that has a culture with mutual respect? You know,
feels like we're ending where we started in terms of working in an organization that has wholesome ideas and ideals as to you know, what you bring to the job every day. We should talk about where the greatest work culture is. I wonder if people watching have an idea, or if you've ever had a job, a gig, you know, a place that you worked where you're just like, you know what, everybody here is legit cool and treats each other with fairness and respect. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, but this is like the coolest, most comfortable place I've ever worked or volunteered at or something. I don't know.
Well, Pete, do you know the overused phrase, be the change you want to see in the world?
It's my favorite phrase. I think it's like my tagline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I live my life that way. And one of the reasons why post-military, I took a comms track in some of the jobs that I had in politics. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to be in leadership positions again is because it's easier to have a like high quality culture if you're the one who's committed to creating it. And it starts at the top, right? So I like to think that I've built cultures well in the organizations that I've run. And I think that's all any of us who care about building healthy workplace, you know, organizational culture can do. And honestly, that's what inspires me to, you know, step into other leadership roles. I'm just a very accountable person. And I'm like, if I don't like what I see out here, it's on me to be different.
Yeah.
You know?
I do. I think that's one of the reasons why we have mutual respect and fondness for each other, is that we do live by that precept, be the change you want to see in the world. Someone in the live chat said that's a Gandhi quote. It's been attributed to him, but I'm not sure he was the first one to say it. It was probably said or thought of thousands and thousands of years ago by some curious human being who was, you know, into philosophy and psychology, but it's a great way to live. However, it also holds us back, because we tend to be too transparent or honest, or, you know, to a fault or to a certain degree. And, you know, it makes it harder to step on and shit on other people to get to the top, Allison. It also makes it harder to make shitloads of money. There's a kind of a shame and a consciousness there that I think impacts your daily choices, your daily life. And it makes it really hard in certain ways. And you see the people who don't have it, and they're doing great, quote, by society standards. Sometimes it holds you back, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine you and I might sleep better at night, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And listen, I just know, like, we're both probably hardwired this way, right? To your point, we can't let our nature get the best of us, but like, I'm still going to be the type of person who wants to be the mentor that I wish I had.
Yes. Yeah.
Or the person who followed through on the thing that they said they were going to do for you, you know?
I don't know. It's interesting to try to wonder the root of where someone's morality or integrity or kind of principle comes from. Some people could say, you know, it's religion or something. Some people, in my case, I think my brother really kind of radicalized me as a young man into thinking a lot of the ways I think. And then I picked it up from there on my own and kept being curious. But what about you? Do you think that's just what motivates you to be very principled and have the moral code that you have? Obviously you didn't get it from the military. I'm sure it increased it or changed it, but going into the military, were you that kind of person?
I mean, I think we're all a product of our circumstances.
Right.
You know, I tell people all the time, like, you know, JD Vance is a good example. Like we both had not super desirable childhoods. But like the lessons I took away from that and the lessons he seems to have taken away from that are totally different. Like I wanted to make things, I walk through life trying to make things just a little bit easier on everybody else. Whereas he's the kind of person who's like, life's hard, and like, good luck. It's like thumbs up, or I might actually do things to make it harder for you.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time that like you see other people who have difficult childhoods and like they don't make it. And I can't explain for why I'm built the way that I'm built and was able to sort of like become as resilient as I am, or to walk through life and make the impact that I've made and hopefully will continue to make. But, to my point earlier about like being a very accountable person, like I try to like maintain perspective on the fact that like, I kind of feel like I'm one of the lucky ones too. It's not like I didn't also like work my ass off to get where I'm at, but like people are born into really terrible circumstances. And I think like what inspires me is to just hold my hand back for folks who maybe aren't as tough as I am, and it's a lot of like, who I am and how I've walked through the world. And I think you can coach that in people like your brother did in you. I somehow coached it in myself and or sought people who would help me, coach it in myself.
Unpack it sometime in the future as well. Have Allison back, says Kevin. And
thanks, Kevin.
So does Will Judy. Have Allison back in the near future. Yes, have her back again, please. Of course, always. We love talking to you. This is great. I always love hearing your perspective on everything. We talk a lot off the air, but we should do it more regularly in front of people, as we did today. Go learn more about Allison, AllisonJaslow.com. Anything else you want to plug that you're doing, or social media or anything else, Allison?
I don't want to, plug anything tangible that I'm doing, but like, I just would ask your listeners to like wake up every day, seeing what small part that they can do to make things better. Cause like, we're in a team effort situation here, and I think a lot of people are overwhelmed with what we're going through in our country right now, but just like find something small every day to make an impact in your corner of the world. And we're in trying times, but I still believe I'm a relentless optimist. We will get through this, and the American experiment will endure.
Whether or not the American experiment endures, we're experimenting in building community and doing what you just said and relying on each other and looking for purpose, and pick a lane and do something, says Rachel, said my guest the other day as well.
Yeah. And if anybody needs help understanding what's going on with the military, I think one of the reasons why I'm on today is because I was chatting with Pete. I think a lot of people are like scared, but they don't know how to interpret what's happening with the military right now, or to understand like the difference between real threats and perceived threats. I'm here to be of service.
We will do it again very soon. Talk we'll do a whole segment called real threats and perceived threats. Thank you, Allison, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And that's it. There you have it. My conversation with Allison Jaslow. Her website is AllisonJaslow.com. You can go follow her on social media and watch her on TV. Follow her on Instagram, especially. It's probably a good place to follow. And that is all I've got for you. That is it. Her Instagram, by the way, is aide Jaslow. Go give her a follow there. Follow everything that she's doing. And that's it. That's all I've got. I don't know if I'm going to do anything for this weekend or not in terms of shows here. You'll see if you're a subscriber. And if you're not, please become one. That's it. That's all I've got, you bumblebees. Going back to Bumblebee permanently because my friend Cindy made the point as to why I came up with it to begin with. She reminded me that it was inspired by an actual bee who I saw very persistent trying to get into a flower in Sicily so many years ago, and what it meant to me and how it's a metaphor for my life. And so maybe yours as well. You guys are so supportive and consistent. Those of you that listen to the whole show and all the way to the end of the show, you are my bumblebees. I really appreciate you. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. JohnCarroll.org. See him live with me and several others November 6th. And find the helpers. Be mindful of the moment. write or voice text in a journal, meditate, do a little cardio, get outside. Have a great weekend.
Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and hear